Good morning and welcome to Starting Point, where you deliver news from home and around the world. It's a public holiday today, Siska Becker.
It is a national holiday, Uli, so hopefully everybody is enjoying their time now in their day off. But
Absolutely.
It's not our day off. We're still here
Yes.
for Starting Point today, and we have something very special.
So tell us more about it.
So not only the usual array of information, but today is actually the commemoration of Europe Day.
Europe Day, so every May 9.
Every May 9th is
Okay.
Europe Day, and to talk about that and also about EU relations with Indonesia, we have a very special guest, the EU ambassador to Indonesia.
Cannot wait to do that. So let's begin. This is Starting Point. European Day can refer to several different celebrations in Europe, but one of the most important is Europe Day, celebrated every May 9. It is a significant day in the history of European integration and is considered a milestone in the journey towards European unity.
On May 9, 1950, Robert Schuman, the then French foreign minister, proposed the establishment of the European Coal and Steel Community, or ECSC. This proposal laid to the groundwork for further European integration and marked the beginning of what is now known as the European Union. Schuman's declaration is seen as a pivotal moment in the journey towards peace and integration in post-World War II in Europe. The Schuman Declaration is considered a historic milestone as it marked the beginning of what is now known as the European Union. May 9th became a symbol of celebration for peace and unity among European nations. In 1985, European leaders decided to officially designate this date as Europe Day. Over the decades, Europe Day has become an opportunity for European citizens to celebrate the cultural diversity, history, and shared values they hold. The celebration often features cultural events, conferences, discussions, and activities highlighting the successes and challenges faced by the European Union. Every year, Europe Day is celebrated with various events and activities across Europe. It is an opportunity for European citizens to celebrate their unity while also reflecting on the values of peace, democracy, and cross-border cooperation that underpin the European integration project. In addition to Europe Day, European Day can also refer to other celebrations or events held in Europe to commemorate the continent's cultural diversity, history, and heritage. This may include music festivals, art exhibitions, cultural conferences, and more, all aimed at strengthening European identity and fostering solidarity among EU member states and across the continent.
So there you have it. Today is Europe Day. It is commemorated every May 9th after Robert Schuman Declaration, and it is considered a historic milestone as it marked the beginning of what now is known as the European Union. Now, to talk more about Europe Day and also about the relations between Indonesia and European Union, we now have the honor of the presence of EU Ambassador to Indonesia, His Excellency Denny Shabai. Hello, Your Excellency. Good morning.
Good morning, Excellency.
Selamat
Welcome
pagi.
to Studio Selamat Pagi. Thank you for coming to TVI World.
Yes, thank
My
you so
pleasure.
much for coming down
happy
here.
Europe Day.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
So, Excellency, for our viewers who are probably not familiar with the relevance of the day, could you please explain to our viewers the history and significance of Europe Day to the Union, to the individual nations, and maybe to yourself personally?
Thank you. Well, Europe Day is a special day, especially in this day and age, because it's a day about peace. What happened in Europe? It's great. We invented the concept of sovereignty, nation. You know, that it's separate from religion, it's delineated by border with a government. So this happened with the Treaty of Westphalia. And once we invented that, we thought, okay, that's a good system of governance, and we're going to have relations from state to state rather than empires. But what happened? 500 years of war.
Yeah.
500 years of war. And now, since 1950, we've had peace inside Europe. Outside, it's much more difficult. But inside Europe, these countries that waged war for 500 years, now they decide together. And Europe Day is the principle of deciding commonly about things, to put things in common so that we avoid war. So this is what this project is
So
about.
how did it begin in the first place?
So at the end of World War II, 1945, what happened? Well, first of all, independence of Indonesia,
Yeah.
Yes.
but also the start in Europe to say how we can avoid to have 15 to 20 million deaths. That was the death toll just in Europe, much bigger in the
Yeah.
rest of the
Rest
world.
of the world, yeah.
But just in Europe, the equivalent of a city like Jakarta, totally dead. So people looked for solutions. So they looked, and NATO was created in 1949, but the EU was originated in the efforts of those people to say never again. And they thought, let's put our things together like this. If we manage together, we will avoid war. And the thing that was key for the war at that time was coal and steel. So Schuman, who was born from a father who had been German and French, and the citizenship depended on who won the last
A
war.
French minister at that time?
Yes, but he was born in Luxembourg,
In
from a
Luxembourg.
mother who was Luxembourger.
Okay.
A country just between
Just
Belgium
between
Yeah.
and
Bel-
France.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he was born from a mother who was Luxembourger, and his father started his life as French. Then French lost the war against Germany. So the father of Robert Schuman became German. So he was born a German,
Okay.
but then he became French because French won the next war.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So he knew France and Germany
Yeah.
perfectly well because he had got both citizenship. But at the end of World War II, he was a French minister. I mean, at the end of World War I, he was French and he became a minister. And then after World War II, he was first prime minister and then minister for foreign affairs. And he really thought hard, how can I avoid a war between my two parent countries?
Oh, okay.
And that's,
So it was
he said,
personal as
It
well
was
for him. Yeah.
personal. It was personal.
Okay,
Wow.
so the aim is to seek unity and at the end prosperity for all countries in Europe. But how is it commemorated now in the member states of the European Union?
So it's not exactly like a national day. You know, it's
Yeah.
not like the 17th of August in Indonesia
Okay.
about independence. No. There's only one member state in which it's an official holiday, and it's Luxembourg, where Robert Schuman was born.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But in the rest of the member states, it's not a national holiday. It's more an opportunity to pause and reflect about what Europe has brought. And it's, you know, we have a war in Ukraine, we have a war in Gaza.
Yeah.
So this is the ideal moment to reflect about peace and to see how Europe can help having more peace in the world.
Okay. So how does it mean for you personally, this Europe Day?
Well, for me, it's very significant because I grew up in Belgium. So in Belgium, on the 9th of May, all the EU institutions open their doors. So everyone can go, speak to leaders as officials,
Right.
and try to have a feel of what is Europe.
Wow.
And in my family, we all work for the EU in this one way or another.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
So for me, since I'm a child,
Yeah.
I've been, you know, 9th of May has been very significant for me. So it is really my entire professional career and
Right.
even of my parents
Yes.
is centered around that.
So even
Okay.
from when you were a little kid, you started to begin interested in diplomacy because, you know,
Yeah.
partly because of that
And
historic
living in
day.
Belgium, which is considered as the capital of Europe,
yes.
must also have an effect.
Exactly, exactly.
All right, Your Excellency, now we'll continue to talk about the relations between Indonesia
Yeah.
and the European Union.
Yes.
Now, we've learned that just recently, at the beginning of this month, you visited the future capital of Indonesia, Nusantara, along with a delegation from the European Board of Commerce to seek for investment opportunities. Now, please tell us more about that visit.
Fantastic visit, very impressive. We had the honor of being guided by the deputy chairman of IKN, Agung Wicaksono. I really recommend. We did a vlog on Instagram on the Uni
did
Europa site, and he explained the vision of Indonesia. So it was very impressive to go there and see the development there.
Okay, so you found everything quite interesting at the new capital. So how does your perspective from the European Union about the new capital of Indonesia?
Well, I think, first of all, how we see it is first, it's a message to Indonesia, to Indonesian people. A new capital is also in line with the new vision,
Yes.
2045. So it's a projection. It also says that perhaps the whole Indonesia is not just Java.
Yeah.
It moves
Yeah.
to a place that is more central to
Right.
the rest of Indonesia. To the world, it's a message to Indonesia, but it's also a message to the world that Indonesia is projecting itself in the future, wants to be more assertive in the world. But I was really interested is the kind of approach of Indonesia on defining the standards of what is a new city. You know, there's a lot of reflection on what is a new city, how we can live together in a better way and a more sustainable way. And that was the most impressive part for Europeans.
It must be interesting for you as an European because most European cities put a lot of effort and concentration on making sure the cities are green, sustainable, and that is also one of the principles that is put down by the builders of our new capital city. So that must be interesting for you.
It is very interesting because what's happening in Europe is that Europeans are so concerned by climate change that they're ready to fundamentally change their lifestyle. So you lived in Brussels. When you lived in Brussels, you've seen
in 1993, 1994, yeah.
So when you lived in Brussels, you saw that everyone was taking their car even to do 1 kilometer.
That's true.
Oh, okay.
Now it's really becoming almost impossible. We have emission standards that mean that certain cars cannot be even in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no place to park. You need to have a special authorization. So you need to have your special garage.
Yeah.
Basically, you need to invest in an electric car. So you need to recharge it. So when you have to recharge, you don't do it for one. So we are changing our lifestyle, which is not always easy. You know,
Right.
that means that you take the bus rather than your car to do your shopping, that the kids have to go around with public transportation, that you use bicycle. So we are changing, and it's very hard. But what's interesting is in Nusantara, it's from the start. It's totally
Yes.
integrated in the planning.
Right.
And that for us, there's a lot to learn from it. So we are looking with a great curiosity and interest how this is going to shape up.
Absolutely fascinating. So hold that thought, Excellency. We're going to move to our next report. Indonesia and the European Union share a long history of diplomatic relations marked by cooperation in various fields. Let's take a look at a short brief about bilateral relations between Indonesia and the EU.
Indonesia and the European Union share a long history of diplomatic relations marked by cooperation in various fields. In recent years, both parties have intensified their efforts to deepen bilateral ties, particularly in areas such as sustainable development, energy transition, and environmental conservation. This article explores the evolving relationships between Indonesia and the EU, with a specific focus on collaborative initiatives related to Nusantara capital city, energy transition, and environmental protection. In Nusantara Capital City project, one of the significant areas of cooperation between Indonesia and the EU is the development of Indonesia's new capital city, Nusantara. With plans to relocate the capital from Jakarta to East Kalimantan, the project presents opportunities for collaboration in urban planning, infrastructure development, and sustainable city management. The EU has been actively engaged in providing technical assistance and expertise to support Indonesia's efforts in building a modern and sustainable capital city. This collaboration not only strengthens bilateral relations but also contributes to the realization of Indonesia's vision for inclusive and resilient urban development. Meanwhile, in energy transition and renewable energy, Indonesia and the EU share a common goal of transitioning towards clean and renewable energy sources to mitigate climate change and promote sustainable development. The EU has been a key partner in supporting Indonesia's efforts to enhance its renewable energy capacity and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Through various initiatives and partnerships, both parties have worked together to promote investments in renewable energy infrastructure, technology transfer, and capacity building. Furthermore, Indonesia's abundant renewable energy resources such as solar, wind, and geothermal present immense opportunities for cooperation with EU countries in achieving carbon neutrality and advancing the global energy transition agenda. In environmental, preserving Indonesia's rich biodiversity and natural ecosystems is a shared priority for both Indonesia and the EU. Collaborative efforts have been underway to address common environmental challenges, including deforestation, land degradation, and biodiversity loss. The EU has provided support for sustainable forest management practices, conservation projects, and initiatives aimed at combating illegal logging and wildlife trafficking in Indonesia. Additionally, bilateral dialogues and partnerships have facilitated exchanges of best practices, technical expertise, and knowledge sharing in environmental governance and conservation strategies.
We are continuing our conversation now with our very special guest, the Ambassador of European Union to Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Dini Chaibi.
So, Excellency, we're talking about your experience in the Nusantara. So, what are the long-term outcome that is expected by the EU from this collaboration between Indonesia and the rest of the Europe?
I would point to three possible outputs. As I said, we are very interested in seeing how Indonesia will define its standards of sustainability in cities, because we have standards, we would like to improve them. So the way Indonesia is going to shape the standards of sustainable city is very important. These standards will rely on technology. So we have a lot of technology, sensors, management of people, resources. So if we can see how it works, if we can exchange experience with Indonesia, that would be very interesting in terms of technology. And the third one, and that's why we had more than 30 European companies, it's investments. If there's any way to invest in a sustainable way for the development of that city with European companies, Eurocham, the European Chamber of Commerce here in Indonesia, is keen to continue the conversation they initiated last week in Nusantara.
Okay, now from the perspective of those 30 companies representing different companies from Europe, what are their main concerns when it comes to investing in the future capital?
The main concern, I think, is that the city is obviously an administrative capital. So when you visit it, you can see clearly the structure of power, or the ministries going to interact with. But the companies are interested in how the added value on a commercial basis will be produced. So they would like to have more information on how the companies will integrate themselves in that structure.
Okay, so let's hope that the cooperation will stay strong for the next couple of decades before the capital can really show its own strength. So a new capital being built, I mean, it's really to environmental issues as well. How do you feel about this issue, and what are the concerns, about the environment in Indonesia from the perspective of the EU?
Well, we have a lot of discussions between European Union and Indonesia, but it's very important to say that the relation is much broader than that. It's not just environmental issues. The key irritant has been about the impact of palm oil on deforestation. So we talk a lot about deforestation, but I think that there are a lot of positive sides to that conversation. The first one is that we can see that the government at the technical level plus the industry of palm oil are reforming themselves so that they can continue to have access to the European market. So the government is putting a kind of dashboard, a lot of information that allow Indonesia to define what is due diligence for a product. What does it mean? It means that the people in Europe that will use palm oil know where it comes from. They know that the land is legal, that the person has a permit of exploitation, and they can trace it to the place where it has been taken, so that anything that has been deforested after 2020 is not accepted. But Indonesia, since 2018 has done massive efforts to stop deforestation. So in principle, once we have the legality and traceability of the product, we should be fine.
Okay, so it has been a sensitive issue actually in the relations between EU and Indonesia, and it's good to know from your perspective that there are actually positive changes and positive progress, because we know when it comes to environment and climate change, those are key issues for the European Union. Now, you mentioned about how the relationship has been strengthened and also broadening. I want to actually discuss a little bit about a conference that happened back in October 2023. I think you attended that in the beginning of your posting here in Indonesia, which was held by a delegation of the European Union. It's called Team Europe, if I'm not mistaken, with the Indonesian stakeholders on how they can accelerate the partnership, especially in clean energy transition. And part of that commitment is a 3.5 billion euros in the Just Energy Transition Partnership. Could you give us an update on that partnership, please?
Yes, so we have what we call the JETP, Just Energy Transition Partnership. So it's not only member states of the EU, so the member states of the EU is France, Germany, Italy, Denmark, and then you have the European Investment Bank, and then the EU. But then you have others, UK, Norway, Canada, but the leaders of that engagement are Japan and US. So it's very broad. It's a platform for investment. So it's an investment plan. So basically, to make it very simple, is that how can international community with big actors, Japan, US, can help finance the conversion of PLN power plants, which are coal-fired, to renewable energies. So it's an investment plan. But, for example, to have renewable energy, you need a better grid. So you need to invest in the grid as well. You need to invest in the transformation of power plant. So it's a huge scale effort. At the moment, Indonesia would like to see more concrete investment. They would like to see the money flowing in projects.
Actual concrete funding.
Concrete funding.
Right.
And those investors, what they want is to see a change in the regulatory framework, in the sense that if you're Indonesian and you want to install solar panels on your roof, you need a special authorization. The batteries import is subjected to certain restrictions, which means that the price is very high. And PLN will not pay you if your solar panels give electricity to PLN. So the investors are like, let's change this so that people have more incentives to put solar panels, so that our investments have more chances to return. So we're a bit in this conversation. Indonesia is show me the money, and the other are like, show me the change. So we need to work harder to stem the pump and start to have projects. Perhaps we start with projects that are very significant, but that have a very strong value, so that others can invest more.
Now, as a diplomat, this kind of cases, I'm sure you've seen this all over the world many, many times. So from your experience, what was the best approach to deal with this kind of situation?
Yeah, this tug of war between two interests.
First of all, and to come back to what you said, it's not only the European Union that has specific concern about the environment. Environment is for everyone. And Indonesia is one of these countries in the world that is one of the most important for this global challenge. You have Brazil with the Amazon forest, Congo, but Indonesia is in that very small circle of countries that whatever they do with their resources, it has an impact for the rest of the world. So, and Indonesia is the fourth most populous country in the world. So Indonesia is special. Indonesia is special, and we know it in Europe. So that's why the investment and the conversation is more important than in many other countries. And that's why the solutions, to come back to your question, have to be very specific to Indonesia.
Right. So it's contextual, depends on the situation. But it's good to know that, we've been working together and the collaboration has been going strong as well. Especially lately, there's been a lot of changes politically in Indonesia as well. We just had an election. So how would the future look like with this new coming up government and this year? How do you feel about it?
Well, the thing that is really amazing for, especially to talk about it on Europe Day, is the elections. 200 million people voted in 8 hours.
One of the biggest events in the world.
200 million in 8 hours.
And direct elections too.
Direct elections, several levels. Not, no incidents. is just amazing. It is simply very, very impressive. And the result is also very impressive because to get to that kind of score in a very democratic environment is very impressive. And even the follow-up, now you can see people are all accepting the outcome and they are all working together to make sure that the winner makes this a success. And there's this, really circling the wagons and working together for the future. So it is very impressive and it gives a lot of confidence to the people outside of Indonesia that Indonesia is on its path to delivering on the vision of 2045.
All right, that's exciting. Now, what are you most excited about in terms of strengthening and accelerating the partnership with Indonesia in terms of environmental issues and energy transition? Do you see Indonesia actually be able to achieve the emission neutrality, for instance, and how would that also help EU's goal and mission to be able to achieve that globally in a global scale with Indonesia's partnership?
As I said, environment is very important. It's the #1 challenge for the planet. But our conversation with Indonesia is much broader. And I think that in the current environment, we have a terrible, terrible war in Gaza. We have a terrible war in Ukraine. In this part of the world, there are tensions, and perhaps there will be more tensions. So our conversations with Indonesia is much broader than just the environment. For the environment, what we hope to do is really to go back to the JETP, to use this platform of engagement to accelerate the transition in a meaningful way, fast way, with massive investments from Europe. In Europe, we are a declining population, aging. We work only 5 days a week. We have a fantastic education and medical system that is costly. The only way for us to keep this global lifestyle superpower status is to work very closely with the countries that have incredible growth. Indonesia, 5% a year, and perhaps it can go up to 7%, but for that, OECD membership and the reform to get there are crucial. So that's the thing. We want to work with Indonesia to see how we can invest because it's vital for us. But for that, we need some reform on the regulatory framework. And this is going to be a continuous conversation for the years to come.
So obviously we can learn a lot from the European Union, but I'm sure you've also learned a lot about Indonesia since you've been posted here, because this is actually not your first time.
Not the first time. So you first came here in 1988?
1988 as a student.
As a student,
right?
and you traveled in Indonesia. In what areas in Indonesia at that time?
So first of all, so I landed in Bali in '88. So it's before most of your viewers were born. That's how old I am. So I landed and I had no clue where I was or what I would do. So
by yourself?
By myself,
solo
alone.
Traveling,
solo traveling.
Okay.
So I went to a warung and I asked for a soup. And it was so spicy that I started to cry a lot. And all the kids of the village came and started to laugh. But since they were all there, I wanted to show that I could eat the soup. So the more I was crying, the more they were laughing.
You became entertainment.
So I became entertainment, and I met a Balinese young man like me. And so we rented a moped, and we went all around the island with a moped, staying with his cousins.
Wow. So you stayed in a Balinese home.
Balinese home, and plugged a chicken in the morning.
Wow.
And,
Really? You became a proper local.
Must be one of the
At
best
the
time of
time.
your life, I
very
imagine.
nice. Well, Bali is still very beautiful, but at that time, almost no tourists and such a wonderful scenery.
So it must be fascinating for you to see all the differences between Indonesia back then and Indonesia now, the developments and the progress. What was your first reaction when you went back to Indonesia in your new posting?
But I came back to Indonesia several times for work in between, so I could see over the years the changes, but it's such a success story. Reformasi, beyond the towers and the money.
Right.
In terms of nation building, you have your archipelago is a continent with so many diverse people, and everyone is proud to be Indonesian. Everyone, is committed to this nation, and this done in a very short amount of time. 75 years is not that. It's just amazing how the nation has been built, because 88 is before Reformasi. So that's the biggest change for me.
Okay, so after all these years, you learned a little bit of Indonesian as well.
Yeah.
What kind of Indonesian words that
what would be your favorite Indonesian phrase?
No, there are two magic words.
Two
Okay.
magic words, and that is
Belum sudah.
belum.
Those are magic words,
Yeah, belum
that
or
answers
sudah.
a lot of questions.
Fulfill a lot of needs.
Your Excellency, thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
our
Such a
conversation.
pleasure.
Yes, and once again, happy Europe Day. Hopefully, the relationship between EU and Indonesia
Yes,
can
indeed.
only be strengthened and the partnership even more accelerated. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
enlightening
Selamat
us.
Hari Eropa.
Selamat Hari
Eropa.
Eropa. Terima kasih banyak. So yeah, there was such a great conversation that we had today. We had a lot of fun talking about Europe Day, Siska Becker. So what do we have next?
So next, after that very enlightening conversation, we can go to our next report.
Okay.
To give our viewers as much information as possible in this day off, and hopefully we
Yes.
can give you more information. First of all, about the geopolitical landscape that the ambassador was talking about. There are
Okay.
some happenings that are happening now around the world that we need to tell you about.
Okay.
For instance, about how Indonesia condemned the Israeli military attack in the Palestinian city of Rafah and the forced takeover of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. Here are more details on that.